The Jamie Dyer Show.
Welcome to the podcast, Alex. Tell me, what is your passion?
Today I'm going to talk about the Stranglers, the British rock band, punk, in some cases people think, and I've been following them for about 30 years now. I wasn't an original fan, obviously I was too young to remember the first time around, but I just think their music's fabulous and, you know, their arrangement and melodies and stuff like that, and that's what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm not. I will come out and admit straight away that I'm not too familiar with the Stranglers. I sort of know about maybe the big hits, but I assume that there are lots of really interesting albums as well as those hits.
Yeah, they're one of those groups where you won't get the same thing on every album, really. You know, each album will be different, so you won't get the first couple of albums were sort of more aimed at the punk market, probably. And that, but after sort of about 1979, they sort of changed in experiment with other types of music as well. So that's what I like about them. You know, they didn't stay the same for each particular album. They did.
No, and it's always great when a band continues to reinvent themselves in such a way. And are they still together, the Stranglers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not the original lineup. I mean, Hugh Cornwell, the original singer, left in 1990, and the our drummer Jet Black retired. I mean, he's 82 now. Jet Black, he retired a couple of years ago, and unfortunately, I lost Dave Greenfield, the keyboard player, earlier this year, passed away sadly this year. So we've got Jean-Jacques Bonnel, who's still one of the originals left in the band, and they're still together. I think there's a last tour planned for next April. At the moment, it was put back a while because of the virus. So hopefully from April they'll be able to go out on the road again from April. If not, maybe later on in the year, next year.
Hopefully, yeah, because many bands this year have had to cancel and postpone, and I think a lot of bands, including The Damned, are supposed to be going out next year. Now, when you first became aware of them, which era of the band was it that kind of struck your attention?
Well, obviously everyone knows Golden Brown. I mean, that was the big hit, you know, everyone sort of remembers, and obviously Always the Sun. But I sort of bought the Greatest Hits album. I think the one from was released around 1990, and I bought that, and I sort of liked that, and I sort of started buying the old albums from start to finish for that era as well. So, and obviously a band sort of went on during the 90s, which I saw them live. I was too young to see the original lineup, obviously, but I saw the Mark II lineup quite a few times, and the current lineup as well, a couple of times as well.
And do you feel like you missed out on seeing the original lineup, or are you completely happy with what you saw?
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice. Obviously, I'm a sort of person who I tend to like music about a generation before I was born, sort of thing, you know. And obviously, a lot of those bands either broke up or the lineups changed over the years. So, as you know, with Status Quo, obviously, I've seen different versions of those over the years. You know, the classic lineup as well. So, a lot of those bands sort of like keep on, obviously, but the audiences might fall away a little bit over the years. But they always tend to have the same people come in every year to see them and stuff.
I think it is a common thing these days. I mean, you say that you like music from generation before. I think a lot of that is exposure from parents, or even in some cases it's because in the shop older music tends to be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, obviously, I know a band with such a big a back catalogue as well. You sort of go to the old albums as well. Obviously, I don't think anyone in my family was a big Stranglers fan. Obviously, with other rock music they were, I think, but it was something I picked up for myself, you know, and obviously became a big fan. Then, you know, I bought the albums as well and some of the newer stuff.
Yeah, and continued to support the legacy of such a band. Now, my recent exposure to them, I don't know whether you watched the Top of the Pops repeats on BBC4, but they're currently playing some of those episodes from then, and the Stranglers do appear a couple of times because they had a single around then, and I've seen comments that maybe it was a little bit tired at that time. What is your take on it?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're referring to the 1990-96 Tears cover single, which was the last one with Hugh. Obviously, that was Hugh's last album they made with him as well. So he was getting fed up at the time, and there was slight things in the group which were going wrong between the members. So, and he decided to leave in August 1990. So yeah, it was obviously a lot was going on within the group at the time, and he didn't feel they were going any further musically as well. So he decided to jump ship. And a year later, they reformed with a different lineup, which sort of didn't do that well, unfortunately. So through the 1990s, they had a big following live, but obviously the albums didn't sell, during that time. So obviously, when a member leaves a band, it always something big happens, isn't it? So
yeah, and I think a lot of those legacy bands in the 90s did struggle because they were starting. There was this fashion for recording covers, singles, and albums, and also kind of being on the nostalgia circuit, but not the nostalgia circuit.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of actually covers albums during that time, didn't they? I mean, I think Paul McCartney even did one, didn't they, at some point? So, but I think things have gone full circle again the last, say, 5 to 10 years. A lot of those bands are making new music again, and obviously the albums are selling again. So, obviously the older market obviously are still sticking with the band, and obviously the newer fans maybe have been coming into listening to the older stuff and buying the new stuff as well, which is good.
Yeah, it's always nice to see, actually, things continue and new fans come on to this fold. Because like you say, when you have an expansive back catalogue, I mean, when we're talking about a back catalogue, how big is it?
What, the Stranglers back catalogue?
Yes.
Obviously. Yeah, well, there was an album every year from 1977 up to 1990. Obviously, there was 10 studio albums and a couple of live albums, and obviously in the 90s there was a couple more studio albums, but it wasn't till 2004 with an album called Norfolk Coast came out that would actually sort of regain some like nice reviews from the press again. Obviously they had what time without anyone taking any notice of them, and obviously from 2004 onwards it's become the albums have started to make good albums again since then.
Do you think perhaps it's a case of they drifted out of fashion and now they're suddenly back in again?
Yeah, it's like any band of that era. Obviously, there was lots of bands fell away during that time, and trends change all the time, don't they? You come back into fashion and go out of fashion. And obviously, during the 1990s, there wasn't much rock music around. In the early 90s, it wasn't sort of till 1994, 95 when you had things like Oasis and all that sort of stuff, for a bit. But I think in recent years it's become popular again.
Yeah, I think so, and I think people have an appreciation for things. You don't tend to have kind of overall definitive styles in fashion. It's all very much everything is on the table.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's at the moment there isn't much rock music in the chart, but obviously a lot of those bands aren't worrying about releasing singles anymore, are they? Sort of thing, and obviously everything's gone by streaming and download. But if you look at the album charts, I mean, compared to the single chart, a lot of the album chart is all older artists. Looking at the top 20 the other day, I mean, there's people like Cliff Richard, Rod Stewart, The Who, and all them other sort of bands in the top 10. So obviously there's a market for albums still. So I think a lot of artists are sort of only going that route now for albums rather than singles now.
Well, we've almost come full circle there because back in the 70s, albums were the thing to get. You released a single in order to sell the album.
Yeah, but it's become the other way around a bit now, isn't it? Sort of thing, Obviously, these bands, I mean, you hardly see Cliff Richard in the chart. And obviously, it's Christmas time, you always see him in the chart, didn't you? But obviously, he's had an album out recently, which has done well, and top 5. And who else was there? Was it Rod Stewart, AC/DC last week as well? So he's top in the album chart. So there is a market for that sort of thing, And I'm not saying it's all older fans buying the music either. I mean, there's a lot of, the next generation down are interested as well, I think. So.
As we said previously, now it's funny you should name drop AC/DC, because one thing that I find with them personally, and whenever I look at reviews, is they always say, well, their music has started to sound very samey. Is that the case with the Stranglers, or are they constantly evolving?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not so much in the last few years, but they've always had that recognisable sound. I think obviously the fan, the keyboards and the basses obviously was the two big things I think which made them successful. But there's a lot of bands who get accused of this sort of all the sound all the same. But I think if you got a certain formula which is successful, you sort of stick with it, don't you, for a while? But obviously there's other bands in the past which have tried to go off into other areas and it hasn't worked for them. But obviously, if it's like something which in the night regarding the Stranglers in the 1990s, they tried to go off into a sort of a different direction a little bit and lost their sound, and maybe that's why some fans fell away from the music a bit as well. So I think if you stick with something which isn't too, out of the way musically, I think you can't go wrong, really.
Well, no, especially when they are a legacy band. Now, as you probably already know, I'm an avid watcher of BBC Four, and a few years ago there was a documentary which was all about music on children's television, and the documentary was called "When the Stranglers Met Roland Rat."
Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah.
Which was a little bit in it. I mean, it was a great title, even though about only 5 minutes of it was dedicated to that particular incident. Was there ever any kind of, from what you know as a fan, were they a little bit precious about some of the appearances that they made?
I don't think so. I think there was one incident in they filmed a concert for Rock Goes to College. I don't know if you sort of seen the programme in archive at all, like late 70s, and well, actually sort of I did a concert for that, but they decided to after two songs come off the stage and smash their equipment up because something in the audience they disagree with, like people being let into the audience which weren't allowed to go in and something like that. And I think they were banned from. I banned from the Top of the Pops for a couple of years for smashing the dressing room up when they were having a fight with another band. So it was all going on, obviously, but they weren't angels or anything. So a lot of controversy with this band, unfortunately, over the years. And I think some of it has actually held them back a little bit with certain things, sort of like commercial-wise and kidnapping journalists and stuff like that. A lot of things used to go on like that in the old days.
Yes, I think there's probably a lot of unwritten stuff from many of these artists, not just the Stranglers. It's a very dicey thing. Have any of them written an autobiography?
Yeah. I've got a couple in front of me. Hugh Cornwell, the original vocalist and singer, he had a book out about 15 years ago. It was called Multitude of Sins, which is a very good read. So that's his biography, and before that he had a song called Song by Song as well, which was about every Stranglers song during his time with the band. So that's worth a good read, and it's still in print if anyone's interested in that. And there's a few other things been like sort of fanzines, like the Strangled magazine as well, which was going for quite a while. I'm not sure if it's still going now though. So there's been a couple of things come out over the years like that.
Well, that is the mark of a band that's popular when they've got their own fanzine dedicated to them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how many bands have them now. Obviously, it's all gone online, a lot of it now, I think, because you've got Facebook and, like everything else now, it's, people go on. So I'm not sure if there's much a market for the actual magazine anymore. But obviously, over the years, it's I've done well. Regarding fandom, having a fanzine to keep you going.
Yeah, I mean, musically, speaking as something of a hardcore fan, is there kind of something behind the curtain there? Is in front you've got all those hit singles. What are some of the best tracks in your opinion on albums?
What the I know the singles. You mean which one of the singles?
Yeah, stuff that was not released as a
Well,
single.
there's some great stuff. Obviously, I mean, a lot of fans go by the first 4 or 5 albums. Obviously, was when the best music was made. Obviously, there's stuff. I mean, there's a track called "Down in the Sewer," which is a great track. It's at the end of the first album. It's a 7-8 minutes long, and there's another track called "Toiler on the Sea," which is another one on the black and white album. And there's the title track to "The Raven," which is another good one. So there's lots of different songs on the albums, which are really good. I mean, I weren't all singles. There's quite a few things which weren't singles, but it's the sort of band you sort of had to buy the albums to appreciate all the music, really.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case with a lot of bands from that period because they were starting to focus more on albums rather than singles. I mean, it is fantastic, and I mean, which album do you think? You say the first 4 are kind of considered the best. Is it that somebody who isn't familiar should go and check those 4 out, or is there like one in particular that's like the one?
Yeah, I mean, I think those first 4 albums, obviously, as time went on, they focused more on singles as time went on. Obviously, into the '80s and stuff like that. But I'll go by the first album, which was called Aratus Novegicus, was the first one, which I mean, it's one of my favourites, and No More Heroes, obviously, the second, Black and White, the third, and The Raven, the fourth. The fifth album was quite an odd thing because they decided to make an album called the Men in Black. It's a whole concept album about that, and this was sort of kind of years before it was a big thing in the '90s with the Will Smith thing and everything, obviously. So they decided to make an album about that concept. It didn't sell very well, unfortunately, but obviously it was something they were really into at the time.
Yeah, well, it's something that they tried and obviously didn't work out. Now, we will wrap up in just a moment, but you say you've seen them live a few times. Obviously, you didn't get to see the original lineup, but do you have memories of the gigs that you went to? What's it like?
Yeah, it's a great experience. I got to know friends through going to those gigs as well, or fans as well. So I met friends there and as well. So it was all good that way, And a few times in the '90s, I went to I've been to Cambridge, London, and places like that to see him. So, and at the time, the audiences weren't over big at the time. It was like that period where they were sort of like in a bit of a lull, but all the people still go to see him who go every year have always been there. So they've always had that fan base from the start. So, and I think that kept it going for a bit, really.
Oh, it's amazing when a band develops a fandom that continues to go and see them. I mean, you say that they might be touring next year. Do you know if they have any new albums coming out?
Well, I think they were working on an album. There's a couple of new songs which were previewed on the last tour, but obviously since Dave Greenfield sadly passed away, obviously I'm not sure what they plan to do around that sort of situation. But obviously the tour was planned for April next year. So, and it was billed as a final tour, which can mean obviously with a lot of bands who say farewell tour, final tour, you sort of never quite know. But obviously they're not getting any younger now. So if it is the last tour, hopefully it'll be a good one, and the final album if that happens next year, hopefully.
Well, maybe so, and I'm sure with a lot of retro or vintage or whatever word you want to use to describe it, with a lot of bands that are releasing, as you quite rightly say, the albums are tremendous successes. Well, I'd like to say, Alex, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the Stranglers today.
That's all right, and take care of yourself, and hopefully we can talk soon.
The Jamie Dyer Show.